Rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Here she comes. Here she is. Oh, I didn't see her.
I don't even know.
Her car went to start. See, peacefully. Everybody was here so long we thought everyone was here. Do I have any changes or anything to the agenda? One thing will be added to discussion, fireworks. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve the agenda as amended.
Moved Morrow. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second Tahar. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Do I have a motion to excuse the absence of Mayor Driscoll?
So move.
Moved Peters.
I second.
Second Mr. Roth. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And now we're going to have a Celtic Festival update.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Just thank you very much for the opportunity. We're now officially in Celtic Week. We started it today, and so I wanted to come here tonight and just give you a little bit of an update and let you know some of the things that have been going on and will be going on this coming weekend. As I said, tonight really starts the official first day of Celtic Week. We have actually, as it's happening right now, the walkthrough of the park with all of our chair people to learn where everything's going to be and see exactly how it's all going to shape up. Wednesday night is the famous Celtic dinner and whiskey tasting over at Max. That is a nice get-together for everybody. Thursday night, we've added something this year where we're actually going to have one of the Celtic bands participate in the summer music series. So people will get a little bit of a sense of the Celtic music, and we're actually, it looks like we've gotten a couple of the Highland Game athletes to volunteer coming out there on Thursday evening and do a little demonstration of their athleticism out there in the street during the summer music series. We decided not to do the caber toss because it might destroy the roads a little bit too much, but just a little bit of a demo just to get people's a little bit excited. Friday night is our continuing pub in the park. Saturday night's the festival day, and then it ends with Sunday being the general cleanup. Generally speaking, I think right now we're prepared for a great year. Everything that we've done and planned for seems to be falling directly into place. It appears Mother Nature's behaving itself a little bit and get rid of the hot weather that we've experienced this past week, and so hopefully it'll stay clear and nice and cool in the evening for us. One big thing I'd like to mention is for this year has been our sponsorship participation. We've really started to focus on that last year, and I think I've reported previously on how that's gone. This year we've gone even further than that. We've had a 150% increase in both cash and in-kind donations. We've added over 25 companies that have contributed to the festival this year around town, 6 new companies. Just a fantastic response by the business community around here. 2 in particular I'd like to highlight. One is a combination of Arbor Beverage and Diageo brands. Don't know too much about Diageo, but they're the owner company of the brands Guinness Beer and several others. They have reached our presidential sponsorship this year. They've contributed over $6,000 to the festival for this year itself. The second one is the Wireless Zone of Saline. They've made a combination of things that really have been fantastic for us. Not only did they do a cash contribution, they've contributed smartphones to us so that we are able to take credit cards at the festival this year for the first time, both in the beverage tents, at the front gate, and in our merchandises. And they've also provided 300 gift certificates of $25 apiece that we're able to give out to every single volunteer of the festival this year. So we can reward our volunteers back for their great contribution in the name of Wireless Zone of Saline. So that's a great contribution from them for this year. One major thing, again, that you'll see in the festival this year is we've completely redesigned the whole park in terms of where things are. We've listened to people in the past as to what they've said, and it seems to, it's the same thing year after year after year. Well, I just recently saw Pat Little about an hour or so ago, and I said, Pat, even you wouldn't be able to find things out this year. That we've turned things around as to where things are going to be located. We've directly made some pathways that'll increase the merchandising, it'll increase the traffic throughout the whole of the park itself and not just stop near the front. We've set up specific areas for family and kids. So a lot of changes in terms of the overall physical layout of where everything is in the tent, in the park itself. And I think people will be very pleasantly surprised at some of the changes that we've made. I mentioned earlier we're going to be able to take credit cards for the first time ever. That makes a big difference. I mean, it does allow for additional spending and things of that nature, and hopefully will help the overall financial improvements of the festival. We've got several nationally known music groups. One of the objectives for this year was to keep people into the park into the evening on Saturday night, and we've tried to accomplish that by spending a little bit extra money, but getting the coverage for that, but having some national groups come in Saturday night to perform. And we've got 3 groups, 2 of which are really just nationally known, internationally known, if you would, and they have their own following, and we're hoping that will make a big splash for us and maintain the crowds into the Saturday evening. We've improved our marketing. If you've been on both Interstate 94, US 23, you'll see giant billboards that have been highlighted the Celtic Festival. First time ever that we've done that. And we've had numerous people comment about the billboards. We were able to get those at not-for-profit pricing through the Friends of the Festival, taking advantage of that as much as possible. In fact, we basically got 2 billboards for the price of 1. So that has been a big difference in terms of the marketing that we've done. And then lastly, as I've mentioned in previous times, a continuous review and monitoring of expenses. That looking and see, do we really need to spend this? How can we do it ourselves? How can we get somebody to help us? We put things out to bids more often this year to try to get cost competitive bids. We've been able to get in-kind contributions. A good example of that, last year we spent over $1,000 on ice alone. $1,000 on ice. This year we went to Arctic Glacier down off of Rawsonville Road on I-94, asked them about ice. They said, sure, we'll be glad to help you. Come on down here and load up your truck. We'd be glad to give it to you for the festival. So right away, there's $1,000 in savings from ice from that standpoint. So a lot of continuous monitoring, keeping the expenses under control so that we can make the festival a lot more independent in that sense. So I guess basically that's it. The 2 most, I want to end with just the 2 most important aspects, I think, of the festival itself are the volunteers and the weather. One I can take care of a little bit. We've got volunteers continually signing up and helping with us. We still anticipate over 250 to 300 volunteers for this festival. The weather, keep our fingers crossed there, but so far so good. Certainly entertain any questions, comments, thoughts you might have.
Questions, anyone? Dave?
Yes, Dave.
No comment. Sounds like you made some real improvements this year, and I know you and your committees have been working really hard, and we certainly appreciate that as you move towards being your own, in charge of your own fate. I guess, like that.
As much as we can be,
As
yes.
much as you
But
can be. Yeah, and where's your kilt?
I'm sorry?
Where's your kilt?
Just shorts right now. Mine's in the dry cleaners waiting for the weekend. But no, we're trying to make, it's not something that can happen overnight or, in one single year. But as you may notice from last year, improvements and changes that were made a little bit more this year, and it will continue to move in that same direction.
Thank you.
Do you want me to ask, have you got your liquor liability insurance?
Yes, we do have all of that taken care of. Has that been
I
forwarded over?
don't think I have it.
I gave it to Pam, and I'll see her and make
Okay,
sure you do have.
check on it.
But no, it is in place. It has that. We've got the certificates. We did get the expanded licensing for this year, so that there is a broader licensed area for beverage consumption in the park itself. We've gone through that with the Liquor Commission to make sure that the proper controls are in place for proper age drinking and so forth. We've met with the Saline Police Department to ensure that it'll be monitored and maintained in an appropriate fashion as well. But we do have I'll get that for you.
Okay.
Any other questions? Great, we appreciate it. We're
Okay.
glad about the initiative and hope to see you on Saturday.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you. Next, we're going to have a Saline Main Street update by Kelly Idzikowski. Kelly? I practiced too, and it just didn't
You
get-
did an excellent job.
Thank you.
Idzikowski. Yes. Nice to meet all of you. It's from Saline Main Street Manager. It's been about a month since I've been there. Things are really rolling. We have had 2 team trainings for our promotions team as well as our economic restructuring team. This coming month in July, we'll be having our design team training as well as our organization team training. Each of those teams has accomplished something in this past month. The economic restructuring, although we did not win the competition for the Saline Alley project, we will be continuing in that process. So that will be something that will be happening in Saline in the next coming months. We also have a number of different outreach and organization type of things coming with the economic restructuring, as far as working with the business owners and going through market research that we currently have. Our promotions team, I'm hoping, as you know, that we have the summer music series continuing through the summer. We've had an excellent turnout despite the weather, the heat and the rain. Things have been great. I know that business has been up in a number of different places because of that. As Bob was saying, we have the Cleary Pub Sessions Band coming this week. In the next meeting for you all, we will be bringing a proposal for banners, streetlight banners, as well as an example of what those will be for approval. Like I said, our organization team will have its training coming. We're still looking for volunteers to be on that committee, but there is a good number of people who have come out for showing their support. And finally, our design team has finished up the Be Bloomin' campaign. We made a total of $4,725 off of that campaign, and we hope to continue and grow that in the coming years. We have a number of things started rolling with the design team, but as we have not had that training yet, things are a little bit slower. As I said, there's a lot of support coming so far from the Saline Main Street, or for the Saline Main Street. Although it's a new program, things are really rolling, and this community of Saline has been a great asset. So thank you, and I'll be back in coming weeks.
Are there any questions for Kelly? Any statements? Thanks, Kelly. Appreciate it. And next, we're going to have a presentation about the cemetery flagpole update and the public dedication by George Peralt. George? And friends.
Good evening. My name is George Peralt.
Bob Kosinski.
Pete Belair.
On May 21st, Council authorized, so proudly we held a committee to initiate a public funding raising effort to replace the current flagpole in Oakwood Cemetery, as well as upgrading the lighting. In addition to a long-term flag replacement contract has been put in place. What so proudly we held has met all three objectives, and we're here to seek your approval to hold a public dedication ceremony in Oakwood Cemetery on July 21st at 10 a.m. It is estimated that ceremony will be approximately less than 30 minutes. The city clerk has been provided a certificate of liability from the National Vietnam Veterans of America, and there will be no services required of the city of Saline. Again, thank you for your cooperation.
Thank you. Any questions? Mr. Rose?
George and Bob and Pete, we have an activity scheduled on July 21st at 9 o'clock in the morning here at City Hall that is likely to run long enough that people would not be able to come from this one to yours. Could you move yours a little later in the morning, perhaps? And then we could get more people to you?
Yeah.
Okay.
But
Like
what
11
would you
o'clock,
suggest? 'Cause we haven't went out to the press yet or anything. Was that about 11 o'clock, 10:30 or
11? Yeah, 11 would be fine. Thank you very much. And then you can come to our event at 9, and we can come to yours.
We appreciate that.
So does 11 a.m. work for council on that Saturday? If those are available? Okay. I think July 21st at 11 a.m.
We got your
Sounds good.
approval?
I guess so, from council.
Yes,
Motion, huh?
certainly no objections.
No objections.
Yeah, great idea.
Okay.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
gentlemen.
Take about 2 seconds. If you would change the time on that, please. This is an invitation to all the city government, if you're running by time,
Oh, sure.
inviting everybody to come.
Okay.
Just make sure you change the time.
Yep, I will. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Citizen comments on agenda items. Under the Open Meeting Act, any citizen may come forward at this time and make comment or question on items that appear on this agenda. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested, but not required, to state his or her name and address for the record. Is there anyone that would like to speak to the council on the agenda items? If not, we'll move forward to the consent agenda. The following consent agenda will normally be adopted without discussion. However, at the request of any citizen or council member, any item may be removed from the consent agenda for council discussion. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve as submitted.
Move to Har for approved and submitted.
Second.
Second, Jim Peters. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Moving on to unfinished business. Non-motorized path, Ann Arbor Railroad and District Library. To acknowledge receipt of the July 5th, 2012 memo from the Public Works Director Fordyce to authorize or not authorize the mayor and clerk to execute this agreement with the Saline District Library for the non-motorized path between Maple Road and Harris Street as submitted, subject to review and approval by the city attorney. To authorize or not authorize the mayor and clerk to execute the agreement for non-exclusive lease of land with the Ann Arbor Railroad for lease of their land between North Ann Arbor Street and North Harris Street as shown on Exhibit A for use as a non-motorized path at a cost of an estimated $600 per year, with the Saline Historical Society to continue their share of $250 per year, and said lease agreement, subject to the terms outlined in the July 5th, 2012 letter from Attorney Grossman, and subject to the final review and approval by the city attorney. Do I have a motion?
I so move
Move Jim Roth,
to approve and authorize.
to authorize and to authorize. Do I have-
Support.
Support, Mr. Rhodes. Discussion. Would you like to have Mr. Campbell speak to it?
And actually, Mr. Fordyce and I are kind of tag teaming on this, and he's worked diligently for the easement. Some of you may recall, we were working with not the easement, the lease agreement with Ann Arbor Railroad, and we initially, 4.5 years ago or so, we attempted for quite some time to get the lease, the current lease that is in the Saline Historical Society's name as the lessee for the depot trail portion of the path. We tried to get that into the city's name and were not successful, just for no apparent reason, but just difficult to communicate, I guess. So what we're proposing with the lease agreement would be to accomplish just that, put in the current portion of the depot trail into the city's name, and add this piece that would be on the westerly end of the proposed new pathway, the joint pathway between the city and the library. And then also, and obviously as part of an agreement, because it is a joint project between the city and the district library, so we have to have an agreement between the two, between the city and the library as well. As far as specific details, Mr. Fordyce is certainly prepared to speak to those, and we'll just go from there.
Are there any questions for Mr. Fordyce or Mr. Campbell? Jim? Mr. Peters?
We currently pay $500 for the piece of property now, and now another price here is $600. Is that an additional $600, or is the total going to be $600?
That is a total.
Total
and-
$600 for both pieces.
Yes, and I did want to note that dollar figure was something that the railroad and I just kind of informally tossed around. They haven't finally approved that. So I was going to suggest a change to the motion. Rather than say a cost of an estimated $600 per year, perhaps we could say up to $1,000 per year, so that I don't have to, if the railroad says 800, then I don't have to come back and.
Yeah, that was my next question, because that was just an estimate, the 600 on the railroad's side. Correct me if I'm wrong, there's a pretty nice path there right now. And how does that fit in with this?
Right.
I mean,
What we're doing with the railroad property is there's a 1,200 feet of it that are already leased by the Saline Area Historical Society, and the society has constructed an aggregate pathway there and also done railroad track restoration that they use as part of the museum activities. If you look at Exhibit A that's attached to the railroad lease, there's a section that's almost black. That's the portion that's currently leased by the society. And then to the east of that, there's a crosshatched section. That's the expansion of the lease that we would need for the new pathway. The existing pathway, aggregate pathway, runs from Ann Arbor to Harris. The proposed pathway runs from Harris to Maple. And we need this little stretch of railroad right-of-way to get from Harris to a point where we can swing up into Brecken Park.
Right. Reading through the paperwork here, it sounds like railroad pretty much holds all the cards.
Yes.
And if they wish, they can recall this piece of property in 30 days.
Yes.
And if we put capital improvements on this, we have to take it back to its original state.
That is correct.
Okay. There's some financial risk there on our part.
Right. I mean, to restore it to its existing state after we're done with our project would be probably a day's work
Okay.
with a bulldozer.
All right.
So
So no structures or bridges or,
the portion that's on the right, the railroad right-of-way is just asphalt,
okay.
so
Thank you.
nothing extensive there.
And just for point of interest too, if the city, if we were to become the new lessee on the depot trail portion, there would be a little more work to put it back to the work that was done to transform it to the trail it is today. But again, that certainly don't disagree that those are all in, like you say, they hold majority of the cards. But I mean, from a staff point of view, and certainly I can't speak for the Historical Society, but they were able to sign that lease, and we don't think that it's a huge risk. If we thought it was if it was high risk, certainly we would be doing something different.
I've got a little clarification that we're working on the, just as you mentioned, east of North Harris Street. The motion indicated that it's the land between North Ann Arbor Street and North Harris Street. It really should be the land between North Ann Arbor Street and North Harris Street and the additional 330. We need to clarify on the, how we want to write that motion. Because isn't this just extending in the additional land and then part of the same lease that already exists?
You could say 325 feet east of center line of Harris.
Is the agreement for the whole thing, though?
Yes.
Okay, so
Yes.
then we need to extend the 325 feet east of
Harris.
North Harris. Okay.
And
25 feet east of North Harris.
additional 325 feet east of North Harris.
And to respond to Mr. Peters' statement about having to restore it to the original, that would mean just letting it go back to weeds and trees and brush, because that's what it's been, except for where the city's.
Well, except
kept it
we would
up.
be responsible to take out any foundations or
Yeah, it would be-
pipe work that we put in,
Right,
so
would
there'd
be
be a
just-
cost associated with that.
Asphalt path is all,
Yeah.
as Mr. Fordyce commented.
I mean, and there was some concern about maintenance and everything, but I think that's being discussed, and Mr. Campbell was going to address that.
Sure. In the agreement, the proposed agreement between the city and the district library, item number 8, says the city shall be required to obtain and/or maintain insurance coverage in amounts reasonably determined by the parties to meet liabilities related to maintenance required by paragraph 5 of this agreement of the path, and name the library as an additional insured. And then paragraph 5 says the city will plow the snow over the entire path and be obligated to provide the same level of ordinary maintenance that the city provides on all trails within the city's trail system, like bush and tree cutting necessary to keep the path in good usable condition. Now, that's the minimal type of maintenance that we, as staff, have said, yes, we believe that's the right thing to do. We would do that. The major repair in item number 6 says repair and construction of items such as asphalt crack repairs and/or failed portions of the path, including any boardwalk sections, will be the responsibility and obligations of each party on its own property. So any major maintenance of the path is going to be, if it's on the city property, it'll be city's responsibility. If it's on the library's property, it'll be library's responsibility. So while typically the city, if we're asked to indemnify or name somebody as additional insured, we typically ask for them to reciprocate that. This specifically is to that minor maintenance or typical maintenance, regular maintenance, to 5. So I don't believe, I've talked with Mr. Grossman, and we agree, we don't think it shouldn't be a deal breaker, as they say, but I did put a call in. It was a late this afternoon, so I haven't had a chance, but put a call to the library to see if they would consider reciprocating that. But if they don't, like I said, I don't think it's because it's not for the general liability. It's just for that maintenance specific to paragraph 5.
So in essence, the city would be liable to make sure it's maintained on their property too, and so that if we don't clean it or clean it, whatever, and there's something should arise, we would be the one held first responsible, I believe.
And I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, I did confirm that with Meadowbrook, our liability carrier. We can do that at no additional cost.
Are there any other questions? All right, so we need to make a change to the motion to add in that one portion where it says railroad for lease of their land between North Ann Arbor Street and North Harris and the additional 330 feet east of North Harris. We're using 330 because that's what was mentioned in your memo.
Okay.
And that okay with you, Mr. Roth?
Yes, it is.
And also up to $1,000 for the estimated per cost of lease? Is that okay too?
I think it's a little high, but in order to make it happen, I'll accept it.
And I accept those changes also.
Okay. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Moving on to new business. Item 12107, we don't have anyone here tonight to speak about it, and there's some issues with it in regards to not receiving a memo and such. So I would entertain a motion to not acknowledge the receipt of the application.
I would acknowledge receipt.
Or acknowledge receipt of it and deny it. As a result, there's a lot of items in here that were never, haven't been appropriately answered, and so at this point, I would acknowledge receipt, have a motion to acknowledge receipt of the application for community event use public ways from Wendy Grizich on behalf of the Unicycle Society of America and deny the request for closures of the streets.
I'll make that motion, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem.
Moved Mr. Morrow. Do I have a second? I'll second it for discussion. Mr. Rhodes.
I believe this unicycle race happened before here in our community, and it was well received by the community residents. There are a lot of folks flying the street, and I wonder if it wouldn't be possible to give this an approval pending receipt of the necessary documentation by the city clerk.
Mr. Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. From a staff perspective, my concern primarily is it's in a neighborhood, and we contacted them and we haven't gotten any feedback from them. At minimum, they need, from my perspective, they need to go door to door in the neighborhood, knock on the door, and just like similar to like a block party, because I mean it's a little different animal than a downtown festival event or something. This is the middle of a residential neighborhood that they're proposing this race, while they have, to me anyway, they've got plenty of street and pathways and parking lots to do something similar on the school campus. But if they were to come and say, yeah, we've talked to majority, we've got majority of folks signed off on this in the neighborhood, not a problem. My concern is they're going to have to close that section off of residential, and if it may or may not be, we're not sure if they've contacted those residents or not. And so that's the concern that I have.
So that would be one of the items that would need to be submitted and then approved by staff. I mean, if they're able to do that. If not, then it doesn't get approved.
Sure.
Okay. I'm a little uncomfortable just denying it flat out at this point in time, although we are within a couple days of the event.
The only thing that I could add is we didn't receive this application until June 28th. We do request that we have 45 days prior to an event so that we can resolve these things. Not to say that we haven't had them within the 45 days and been able to approve. But this particular one, I have contacted her by phone I've also emailed her and left a message telling her that we needed, and I emailed her the document she needed to get the residential sign-off. She has not contacted me back other than her initial thing saying that she didn't think that they would have time to get all the signatures that were needed. They also need a certificate of liability insurance to close the street, and she knows that, and I've had no contact with her.
So based on that, it sounds like they may have withdrawn their idea
And she
anyway.
knew that it was coming this evening. I asked her to contact me if we were going to proceed tonight or if she wanted to withdraw her application, and I've had no contact. So,
Okay.
Mr. Peters.
One more quick comment, that if this does go through, and they're going to have an event on July 14th, and they want to park at the Saline Middle Schools, be aware that that's the same date that the Celtic Festival uses that parking lot. So as long as the organizers understand that.
they have that whole campus the entire week.
Right,
They have events going all week long from what they submitted, so
right.
staff was wondering why they couldn't just have their event right there on that campus. They're already there.
It's fine, but there's going to be a whole lot of cars there on July 14th. So, just so the organizers understand.
Yeah, the closing of this one's for July 11th, which would be Wednesday, and
Wednesday from 3 to 5.
it's only for 2 hours.
I've got a free public show here on July 14th,
Yeah, that's,
7 p.m.
Correct. What they're doing, there's different demonstration things going on, so this one's occurring on that day, and and then there's another thing going on Saturday, I believe, because I think I got an invitation to that.
Right.
My concern on this too, well, actually, Ms. Tower.
Thank you. I haven't been able to confirm this, but I understand there's already some publicity out about the events, and I wonder if this one has been announced. Someone mentioned to me, I hear we're having unicycle races in Saline, but I'm not sure it was referring to this particular event or just the whole set of events. So that would just be another
this is not
question.
listed.
The one announcement I saw was for just Saturday, which was
Okay.
one forwarded by the Downtown Merchants Association.
Okay, so
So
that
that
may
one,
be-
I do
that
know
may
about
be
that
the-
one, but not necessarily this one, because it seemed like this was kind of a last minute.
Well, they do have it on their schedule as criterion from 3 to 5, and it says walking distance from Saline Middle School gym, but they don't say where it is.
Right.
And the reason why I was suggesting it is because it is late, but also the inconvenience to the residents in that area without them actually knowing it. I know it's only 2 hours, but still, it's right at, between 3 and 5 when people are coming home with their kids and getting out of work and such, so. So we had a motion to not authorize. Those in favor of not authorizing the motion, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion to not authorized passes. It's carried. Next item, 12108, application to purchase MERS credited service for Sergeant Kevin Murphy. To acknowledge receipt of the July 2nd, 2012 memo from the City Manager Canwell and June 28th, 2012 memo from Sergeant Kevin Murphy requesting to purchase MERS credited service, to approve or not approve the request of Kevin Murphy to purchase additional credited service as outlined in his application for additional credited service with a calculation date of July 1st, 2012, at a cost to the employee of $63,416, and that the City Council has read, understands, and approves or does not approve the governing body resolution at the bottom of Mr. Murphy's application for additional credited service. Do I have a motion?
I will move to approve and approve.
Moved, Mr. Morrow. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded, Ms. Tahar. Discussion? With that, do I have, please say aye for those that are in favor.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, Washtenaw County Emergency Management Emergency Sirens. To acknowledge the receipt of the July 2nd, 2012 memo from Benjamin C. Pinette, Emergency Service Planning Coordinator regarding outdoor warning siren replacement, to authorize or not authorize the replacement of the city's 2 existing warning sirens to be located at the Woodland Drive west of Maple Road, immediately adjacent to the current site, and Austin Drive dead end at Michigan Avenue, south side of the road. To authorize or not authorize the installation of a 3rd new warning siren to be located at, to be determined, and further to approve or not approve the costs to remove and dispose of existing poles equipment at an estimated cost of $800 to $1,000 per location for ongoing maintenance of sirens at an approximate cost of $480 to $500 annually per siren. Do I have a motion just to acknowledge receipt?
So moved.
Moved to Har,
Support.
seconded Mr. Rhodes, to acknowledge receipt. Discussion? Mr. Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. Ben Panett from the Sheriff's Department is here, from Emergency Services, and these discussions started a year or better ago under former Chief Button in reference to our emergency sirens, our warning system for our folks. And the thought was potentially to work with the county, to partner with them to take over those sirens. And so, without stealing too much of Ben's thunder, I'll let him go through this, but through some grant funding would be the ability to replace our current sirens with new ones, and add in a third, as you read in the proposed motion, and then they would potentially take those over. We would have to pay the annual maintenance fee for each one of them, but I can tell you, based on what we typically spend every year, every couple years when they break, this is a cost savings. So, even up to, again, the $1,500 to $500 per each one is a significant cost savings to the city. Because my understanding, and I'll let Ben confirm that, but my understanding is we pay the maintenance agreement. If something breaks, they come and fix it, and we don't have additional costs.
Correct.
Mr. Panett, if you would.
Yeah, just a little bit more background. Again, this discussion did start approximately a year ago. It was kind of initiated by Mark Breckenridge, the Director of Emergency Services at the Sheriff's Office, in conjunction with former Chief Button, recognizing the need for additional and updated warning within the city. So about a year ago, there was some discussion of funding that through a Homeland Security grant for the larger community at whole. Three locations were proposed for Saline and one additional location within the county at minimum. The Homeland Security Task Force entertained that proposal. It was approved for Homeland Security grant funding. From that point, our staff did some of the legwork, securing approvals from the state and federal level. There's numerous different rounds of approvals that these grant projects have to go through. There will be one additional layer of approvals that we'll have to proceed with after a decision is made here for conforming with environmental and historic preservation of the locations that are determined. So the task force, again, approved funding for up to 3 locations within the city. We secured the approvals necessary initially, and then we began working with the siren vendor, West Shore Services, out of Allendale, Michigan, who maintains and installs the rest of the sirens within the county. We did some site visits here within the last 2 weeks. We looked at population density maps of the city to get a better idea of the 2 existing sirens, how effective they were, in relation to adding a 3rd site as well. So kind of what we came to a conclusion is there's a need for more warning on the west side of the city. The current location at Woodland and Maple is very sufficient for the northern and northeastern side. There's still some additional need on the southern half of the city, though. So what you saw on the siren proposal, the PDF that was attached, we came up with 4 locations, replacing the one site at Woodland and Maple, immediately adjacent, really within about 10 or 15 feet of the existing siren. Where that siren sits right now is on property that I understand will be sold. So inevitably we'd have to replace that anyway. The second siren proposed at Austin Drive at Michigan Ave, right at the dead end there on the south side of Austin Drive at, I believe it's Washington Street. Will provide the necessary coverage on the western half of the town. And then our 2 other possible locations are directly outside City Hall here, right at the intersection of McKay and Harris. And then also a possible location at East Henry and Old Creek. There's minimal differences between those two locations. Obviously, the location at Old Creek and Henry would provide a little bit more coverage to the east. As far as relation to the city limits, that would give you a little bit better coverage off of the Industrial Drive area and would significantly help York Township. And actually, I think that might be part of Pittsfield there as well. But I guess if I had a preference, I would say the location right outside City Hall here would be our preferential. As discussed, there is a little bit of a change in the activation point. Currently, Saline Police Dispatch activates the 2 sirens within town. Our proposal would be then that the County Emergency Services Division will activate the 3 new sirens as we do for the remaining 39 sirens on the county network. The only communities that still retain activation control is City of Milan, City of Ann Arbor, and then Chelsea is a little bit of a different animal. We have dual activation capability, meaning that Chelsea can set off their sirens in addition to the county. There have been some technological hurdles that we've had to try to overcome with that. So I would propose it's an option for you to think about, but from our standpoint, the technology concerns that we've had with it, I wouldn't say it would be a preferable option as far as our standpoint. So as far as monthly testing, I'm aware obviously that the city tests the sirens every Saturday at 12 noon, a noon whistle if you will. The change that would be made here, if the county maintains activation control, your sirens would be tested the same as every other siren that we maintain control of, and that would be the first Saturday of every month, March through September at 12 noon. Again, there are minimal financial obligations to the city. The annual estimated maintenance cost of $480 to $500 per siren, and then again, the cost of removal for the existing poles and sirens would be $800 to $1,000. The siren vendor would physically remove the pole, lay it on a truck, and transport the entire pole and siren head away. So you would lose the equipment and the pole. They'll dispose of that appropriately. At this point, I'll entertain any questions or concerns that you would have.
Mr. Morrow?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. One thing, and I think it's just a point of clarification. So based on your presentation and based on your memo dated July the 2nd, it's my assumption then that on the back page of your memo in which you plot out 4 separate sirens, that you would really only have one in the vicinity between City Hall and Old Creek and Henry, that you wouldn't propose both of those in that proximity.
That is correct.
Okay.
Our proposal was replacing the one at Woodland Maple, installing a new one at Austin Drive and Michigan Ave,
Okay.
and then choosing between one of the 2 remaining
I
locations.
just wanted to clarify or confirm that. My second question is, assuming that council adopts this plan, is there any possibility of doing something similar to what the city of Chelsea does, where both the county as well as the city retain the option of utilizing the sirens when we deem it appropriate?
It is possible.
Okay.
There would be an additional equipment cost. I would venture to say of approximately $1,000 per location. It might be slightly less than that, it might be slightly more. It wouldn't be significantly less or significantly more than that. So that's something that can be entertained now, if you choose, or it is something that could be added via further discussion at a later point in time. It's not something that has to be done at the time of installation, should you choose to do that.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
Mr. Rhodes?
Sort of a follow-up here on Councilmember Marl's last point. Would it be possible to leave the existing siren setup at Woodland and Maple under control of the city that would not incur this additional cost? Because a lot of our townsfolk are used to this noon Saturday siren going off. It's part of who we are.
Understood. As having graduated from the city, I understand that entirely. Speaking to the leaving the existing siren at Woodland and Maple, I believe that siren would have to be removed anyway in its current state.
If I may, That current is on school property, which is soon to be Reinder's property, and they've already talked to us that they don't want it there, so.
Put it on a public portion of the property. I don't want either. Okay, and then the other point that I had in looking at this back map, there's a portion of our city which is not covered on the far west, has some numbers, 154, 94, which I'm not sure what those mean. And so, in looking at that, it looked like if that, the new siren at Woodland and Maple were moved a bit to the west, it would then cover that portion of the city. I think we have a responsibility to do that to those residents there, and still reach to the edge of the city on the east side. And particularly if option 4 was adopted and that siren location was actually moved a little bit further east on Michigan Avenue, because it seems like we've got an awful lot of overlap right in the center of the city, and we're getting kind of thin on the outskirts.
Speaking to that, we did a lot of investigating on the infrastructure side. The infrastructure requirements for installing these sirens require that there is a public utility power transformer immediately adjacent across the street from whatever location we install at. So it has to be easily accessible. It can't be in any underground trenching or anything that would be involved with that. And then additionally, we also look at health and welfare concerns. Looking downtown, there's numerous houses that are two-story houses, whereas if we did put a pole in many different locations, that siren would blow directly into the second floor of an adjacent house. We have to avoid that for health and welfare concerns. Looking at moving the Woodland siren further to the west, I'm not sure how far west we would be able to put it. Obviously, we could probably put it at Ann Arbor and Woodland, but then you're going to lose a vast amount of the coverage to the east that siren would provide. And the same is going to be true of putting a location on Michigan Ave or in that vicinity. So really what we presented is kind of the best of both worlds, if you will, looking at all of the requirements, the infrastructure requirements, your population densities, which are what those numbers represent, the number of persons within a given quadrant, and then the health and welfare.
So there's no apparent way to provide coverage to that, whatever that is out there? Is that Breckenshire or something?
Yep, it is.
Northview.
Installing an additional siren. That would be our recommendation. If we shift that one further to the west, you'll get coverage there. However, you're going to lose similar coverage off to the east.
Well, is that portion, that westernmost portion of Northview subdivision, is it covered by a siren that is not enumerated on this map, i.e. something in Lodi Township?
Currently, there are not any locations in Lodi Township in that vicinity. So currently, I'd have to say no. There isn't any additional warning coverage there. So based on the manufacturer's specifications, it wouldn't provide warning in that area. What we do find is some days you'll find coverage beyond that 1 mile radius. In fact, when we did our last test this past Saturday, I was monitoring a siren in Pittsfield Township at Martin Drive and Pear. I heard your sirens triggered about 30 seconds before we triggered ours. So that's well outside the 1 mile radius, but we still heard it. So
Sure.
It's something we can't guarantee coverage outside of that mile, but it is present on occasion.
So I would still have a concern, I guess. Well, you recommended location 3, because location 4 is right outside of those very tall townhouses that are there, and you're talking about not blasting into somebody's second floor. If it went there, it certainly would.
We did a site visit with the siren manufacturer. That's an acceptable location.
To the site, to the equipment
Or,
manufacturer.
I'm
but how
sorry,
about to the people
with
who live there?
the equipment installer, the vendor that we'd be working with when they did site visits. That was an acceptable location. We did several downtown. There was a site on Lewis Avenue that met the infrastructure requirements for power. There were concerns of health and welfare, and then we also looked at a location on Bennett, just west of Ann Arbor, and there were concerns with that as well, even though it did meet the infrastructure requirements.
So you don't believe there's concerns with the residents of those townhouses on the corner of Oak
Nothing
Creek
that
and
would
Henry?
be a safety concern per the manufacturer's specifications.
Okay.
Mr. Peters?
Just real quick, for the one siren up there to the north, is it possible for a larger siren in to reach that western group of homes?
Sirens only come in
One size?
One size,
Okay.
correct? And speaking to the health and welfare, that's why they don't do larger or more volume output, because it becomes more of a health hazard.
Okay. Now, these are hardwired into the power grid, right?
That's correct. And they have redundant backup power as well.
They have a UPS system?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. That was my next question.
Mr. Roth?
Looking at this map, I agree with Councilman Rhodes that the one to the north would be moved more toward the west. Kind of the numbers of 154 and 94, you add those together, it's 248 versus 154 in a part that's mostly covered. I would rather be there to cover the citizens, the residents that live in that area. And the one where the location now is pretty much industrial, and most of that is covered, and it's pretty much undeveloped at this point in time. So looking as far as people lives, I would agree with him that it should be moved further to the west.
We could explore that possibility.
The one on Henny Field, could you mount that one at the northwest side of Henny Field? That would move that circle out and cover that chunk of subdivisions not covered.
It does not meet infrastructure requirements if we were to keep it in a public right-of-way.
Okay.
Is this integrated with Pittsfield's, has the county integrated with Pittsfield Township yet? Because I'm looking at this, the original plan, and it
Yes.
looks like that was already covering. So if we set off our alarms, Pittsfield goes off at the same time? Or
That's correct. If we were to act as we currently trigger Pittsfield sirens, so they would go off at the same
So
time.
really, we'll have more coverage, because I'm looking at the overlap on the north side of us, and really, you could move, but like you said, we need the infrastructure. If we move the Maple and Woodland Drive more to the west, we need to find a different location that would meet the needs for the infrastructure, but I don't know if there is anything there that we even know of.
We haven't explored that.
Okay. I didn't know if maybe you had already thought that. I mean, that would be the only recommendation. I can understand where council's going with that. If potentially we could move that one further to the west, we still would have coverage to the north, covering the rec center in that area by Pittsfield, and if we're
Correct.
all integrated, they're supposed to go off at the same time, so.
Yep. My only concern with that would be if we had to go all the way over to Woodland and Ann Arbor, then there would be another gap that's created while we're trying to fill a need.
Right. And is there an issue about placing this on the lawn extension versus, because I mean, in that area, that we do have quite a wide area of common space, or public space.
My understanding, it has to be on public right-of-way.
Has to be in the public right-of-way, otherwise we get into similar situations as we do with one at the middle school currently.
All right. And you mentioned that it has to have overhead wiring to it?
Correct.
Okay, because, yeah, everything on that, we buried all the lines for the city lights and everything that are along that stretch of road on Woodland, yep. Okay, so do I entertain a motion on this, one being,
We have a motion.
We have a knowledge receipt, Mr.
oh,
Chairman.
sorry, thank you. All those in favor of acknowledging receipt, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion carried. So now, moving forward on a motion. I think it's pretty straightforward for most of it, except on the location and potentially the location of the North Maple Woodland Drive siren. How do we want to handle that? Mr. Peters?
Could we maybe take one more look at that somehow to see if we can't cover that neighborhood? Is that possible?
We can do that. The only concern I would have, given the time involved with proceeding with the next approval phase and the expiration of the grant, if we do get into a situation where we need to come back for additional approval from council, then we're butting up against some really tight deadlines to complete the project with grant funding as specified. So we can entertain that if it's something that can be done in the next 2 weeks. I think we could get the siren vendor out with us in conjunction again to look for another location along Woodland Drive or in that general vicinity that meets the infrastructure requirements, that doesn't have any underground piping or anything else that we need to be concerned about with the misdig, and proceed from there. But if we did have to come back to council 4 weeks down the road or anytime after that, I have concerns about completing the project.
July 23rd.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Morrow?
Like Mr. Peters, I favor that approach, empowering the department, the sheriff's department, to look at the possible reconfiguration of the placement of sirens, and then bringing it back to council. And although our guest speaker had indicated that it wasn't required tonight, I personally would prefer to retain dual autonomy at the municipal level to also trigger the sirens, as opposed to moving forward with a plan that would only allow the county emergency services to ignite, to trigger the sirens.
So is that a motion?
I don't think I don't think it requires a motion
Mr.
tonight, but
Could we ask for the police department's input on that as well? Their view of pros and cons of keeping control here or sharing control with the county or having the county?
We could, yeah. If,
We certainly can. I mean, we have worked obviously with the police department, but we can certainly at the 23rd meeting have someone come to speak to that.
so if we're looking at postponing this for 2 weeks, is that still going to be insufficient time for you to?
2 weeks would be sufficient. Any
So if we
longer than
approved it
that, I would
on-
have concerns.
Okay. And I would suggest that we might want to do that instead of Mr.
I
Campbell.
just had a question for Ben for clarification. You said that it was approximately $1,000 plus or minus for each one to be able to have a dual, to be able to set those off dually. Don't want to make any assumptions, but who would be responsible for that additional cost?
The city would be responsible for that cost.
is it a one-time cost, though?
That's a one-time cost just for the equipment itself.
Okay.
And then with the maintenance, would that be included in the maintenance contract, or is that totally different, or?
That would, to my understanding, that cost would be included in the maintenance of each location as well.
Okay, thank you.
One of my ideas, I mean, potentially we could just put that on one, if we're worried about having one siren going off at noon, or that potential, I mean, we could do that. That's what we used to have always uptown, and that was kind of the idea where people are concerned about having a weekly siren going. I mean, outfitting all 3 of them, I'm not sure, because I'm thinking that the county is going to be the one that's going to, everything is going to go at the same time, and within a few seconds, we can call the county to do it. I'm not sure what kind of distraction might occur unless, of course, Ann Arbor.
If we
out of
maintain
phase.
control, we won't be able to do a weekly noon test. Again, our preference is to maintain sole control just because of the technological problems we've had with the other communities that have tried to do dual control. It's still an ongoing issue that we don't have resolved.
And that is one of my concerns, is that I think if we were to do this dual thing at this time without it being resolved, we may be
You would be in a
ourselves.
situation where if we can't activate your sirens during a tornado, a dispatcher or whoever on duty would have to be the trigger point at that time.
You haven't had a problem where neither one's been able to activate it, have you?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Okay. So I would say at this point that we would end up postponing this until next meeting, until we have additional information regarding the placement of the the Maplewood siren. But do we have agreement at all on the location of the 3rd siren, either at here or at Old Creek? Or wait until then?
I'd prefer
Wait
to
till
wait,
then? Okay.
make all the decisions at one time if we could.
So, do we just postpone?
Yeah, just move to postpone.
Move to postpone till the next meeting.
I'll make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Moved, Mr. Morrow. Do I have a second?
Support.
Support, Mr. Rhodes. All in favor of postponing it to the next meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Nay.
Thank you.
Motion passes. Thank you. Appreciate your information. Moving on to discussion items. Are there any commission or committee reports from our council members? Mr. Morrow?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. Just one quick announcement on behalf of the Saline Area Senior Center Executive Committee. I just want to follow up in regards to an invitation all of my council colleagues would have received probably 2-3 weeks ago for the Senior Center's annual meeting and summer barbecue to be held next Wednesday, July 18th at 11:30 a.m. at the Senior Center. It's our annual meeting. It's a way to honor our members and to provide them with a free lunch. And of course, all seniors in the community are welcome. But it has been a tradition and a standard of the center to also invite council members. So if you are interested in attending, we would encourage that. And the only caveat is that you need to RSVP by this Wednesday. And again, it would be a week from this Wednesday, July the 18th at 11:30 p.m. at the Senior Center, with lunch generously provided by our friends at the American Legion.
AM, not PM.
Excuse me, yes. You're not going to find too much activity at the Senior Center at 11 p.m., excuse me.
Hey, wait a
No
minute.
disrespect meant.
Okay. Any other? Mr. Rhodes?
I'd like to give a report on the Environmental Commission. At our last meeting, we approved the purchase of 4 more of the recycle containers for our downtown. We purchased materials to construct more rain barrel kits as we sold the last one this last week. We approved the placement of waste management recycle containers in our parks. And we are working with PACT, have worked with PACT and the Saline Police Department and others in the area for the Red Barrel rollout on July 21st at 9 a.m. And each of you should have a copy of the flyer invitation in front of you. So Saturday, July 21, 9 a.m., right out here in our lobby. And I strongly encourage all city council members and staff who can to attend. This will be the placement of the first Red Barrel in the county. So it's an important step to take to keep the drugs out of the hands of those that should not have them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rhodes. Anyone else? Mr. Roth?
I want to mention that on July 22nd, that Sunday from 12 to 5, the Saline Area Historical Society is going to be celebrating their 25th year, and they're doing it by a windmill tour. You can join the tour. It's going to be a little trolley going around. You can join it at the Depot Museum, Brown Farm, and Rentschler Farm, and it's free to the public. And the first 100 kids that come there get a little windmill themselves.
Good, that's good. If there's no others, committee reports or such, any other reports and other announcements? Mr. Campbell, anything?
No, sir.
Okay. One discussion item I wanted to bring up was fireworks. I've had a lot of individuals concerned with all the noise and everything that was going on. It's quieted down a little bit, but I think there's been a lot of concern from the perspective of what is allowable in town, what kind of enforcement's been occurring, or should we be concerned, as some other communities are, in terms of potential hazards where fireworks are being let off next to buildings or where it's dry, and concerns that potentially there may be fires or something of that nature. Can we have some kind of response or whatever happened in this last week? Because I know the new policy or the new law states that you can have fireworks the day before and the day after certain holidays, but it was pretty much going off every night last week. And the other night, I recently saw there was quite a few fireworks going off just to the east of my house, and the number of them coming down to the ground was kind of concerning. So I didn't know if you've had any feedback or any other concerns from citizens calling.
I have not, but we've invited Sergeant Basso from the police department to speak on some of those questions.
Great. Sergeant Basso.
Hi. During the week of July 1st through July 8th, the department received 8 complaints of fireworks through that entire week. Most of the times of those 8 complaints were anywhere between 10 and midnight. Most of them coming in between 10 and 11 o'clock at night. Most of the time, we just gave warnings advising them of the new law. A lot of people thought that they could light them off any time. They didn't understand the day restrictions. So on those complaints, we gave warnings advising them they could only light them off the day before, the day of, and the day after the 10 national holidays. When the police department seizes fireworks, there's a certain procedure we have to do to dispose of those. and it's costly because they become a hazmat. The only way to make a firework inert is to light it off or to soak it in a 55-gallon drum or in a bucket of water. The problem with that is it becomes a hazardous material and it has to be disposed of as such, which is extremely expensive. Our property room guys, we've tried to research how to dispose of fireworks that we do seize, and it's just so expensive because you're dealing with MIOSHA and OSHA rules and regulations, and you have to hire people to come in to take that hazardous material. Even the state police, they have their official and then their unofficial of what they do. The easiest way is just to light it off ourselves in a controlled environment to get rid of it. But as far as the new law goes, there's, through the MACP, they kind of joint this with the new medical marijuana law. It's I don't think it's very well written and understood. So a lot of departments are waiting for new case laws to come down. There's currently one that's started up near Kalamazoo that everybody's kind of waiting for. That's the test case of the breach of peace or local ordinance versus the state law. And I would assume that by next year or at some point that there's going to be some clarification on this law on maybe putting a time restraint on the fireworks. I can see that happening at some point. When? I don't know.
So really, in our case, we were just warning, but we weren't necessarily seizing. I don't think that was more the issue. It was more the concern that people were firing them off and
Correct.
maybe not being careful enough around buildings and objects of that nature.
Where we could still enforce the breach of peace is if it was a loud party where there's music, there's volume of something other than just fireworks, then we can justify citing them for breach of peace without specifically using the fireworks as that reason for that breach of peace violation.
Okay. Are there any questions for Sergeant Basso?
Not a question for Sergeant Basso, though I appreciate the presentation. I'm wondering, this is more of a question or a comment directed at City Manager Campbell. I'm wondering, considering what Mr. Gearboss said and what Mr. Basso said about the confusion about the state statute and then also our ordinance, if it wouldn't be prudent to do something in one of the upcoming FYIs, clarifying what our fireworks ordinance is and what the expectation is for our citizens.
That sounds like a great article for Sergeant Basso. I'll have to talk to Chief Renick about that.
Sounds good.
Apologize for giving you more work, but
Thank you.
It's not good. There's no win-win for anybody in this case, unfortunately. We're kind of at the mercy of the state law.
Yeah, I think everyone's excited about doing it, which is one thing, but it's just also the concerns on the other side where people are, especially this year with the dryness of everything, so, okay. Thank you, appreciate it.
Mr. Gearboss.
Oh, Linda.
Question. Do you have information about how the number of complaints this year compares to previous years?
I haven't researched what we had last year compared to this year. I just looked into what we had this past week. Typically, we get anywhere from 8 to 10 or so complaints. I mean, it's not uncommon. I mean, people still have these fireworks. They still light them off. They just buy them out of the state and bring them back. So it's not like they haven't been going off in years past. More people are doing it. It's more easily available, but it's not like they've never had them.
So your sense is
It's
that
probably
this
about
is
the
not a
same.
significant increase
No.
in the number of complaints?
We've actually probably had less this year, in my opinion, just because people aren't making the complaint because they feel they're legal. So why call the police when
Yeah, that would be it.
they think they're legal at certain, they don't know the restrictions.
Right. I do know there was a lot more this year around the neighborhood, and just even the one night, Wednesday, and then even Thursday night, it was just like everything was going off. So,
Yes.
Okay.
I'm not saying that they weren't being fired off less. We just had less complaints.
That sounds good. Thanks. If there's no other comments or reports or anything, public comment. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time and make comment or question to City Council. This public comment period will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record. Is there anyone that would like to speak to council? If not, is there any other such business to come before the Saline City Council? Just a couple of things. Upcoming meetings of City Council, July 23rd. There'll be a work session at 6:30 p.m. and then a regular meeting at 7:30 p.m. When's our joint meeting with Planning Commission?
25th.
25th, yeah, we have a joint meeting with them to discuss the overlay plan. August 13th for a work session at 6:30 and a regular meeting at 7:30, and August 20th, a regular meeting at 7:30. Are there particular topics for the work sessions, Mr. Campbell?
There are. The 23rd, July 23rd work session will be meeting with Mr. Stoddard, Paul Stoddard from Stoddard and Barch, our financial advisor, reference potential financing for some capital improvements that we talked about during the budget process.
Okay.
And then the August 13th would be to review the PCF capital improvement study that we contracted with Tetra Tech to do.
Okay, thank you. We've already moved to excuse the mayor. Do I have a motion to adjourn at 8:40?
So moved.
Move, Mr. Morrow.
Second.
Second, Ms. Tahar. To adjourn at 8:40. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion passes. Thank you all.